Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are not just talking about a television show. We're talking about a cultural phenomenon, maybe a funeral for a fandom, and really a masterclass in what happens when that trust between a creator and an audience just completely collapses.
We're taking a trip back to Hawkins, Indiana.
We are, but it's not the Hawkins you remember from 2016, is it?
Oh, not at all.
Yeah.
We're looking at the smoking crater of what used to be Stranger Things.
Exactly. We're breaking down a really scorching piece of media criticism today. It's a transcript from a video by the cultural commentator Brandon Morse, and the title says it all. Stranger Things Netflix all over itself.
Yeah.
And I have to say, just from that title alone, you know this is not going to be a polite, it was okay, but I had some notes kind of review. This is an autopsy.
It's a full autopsy. And it's a fascinating case study because Morse, he doesn't come at this as some outsider who hates the genre. Not at all. He makes a point to establish his credentials right away. He talks about how much he loved the show originally. I mean, he was all in. He loved the 1980s aesthetic, the whole vibe that felt like, Stephen King and Steven Spielberg had a baby.
Perfect combination.
The perfect combination. And he says he keeps up interdimensional monsters. And this is a direct quote, "A fat kid at a Golden Corral buffet."
That is a very, very passionate image.
It is. And that passion is so important to understand because it's what fuels the intensity of the anger that comes later. The core premise of his entire argument is that Stranger Things suffered this massive, just catastrophic fall from grace in its final season.
So a total collapse.
A total collapse. He argues that what started as this tight, mystery-driven thriller, with real stakes, it just became a delivery system for messages. He points to a complete breakdown in narrative logic, characters that became, unrecognizable, and a total evaporation of any real stake.
And our mission today is really to unpack why this fan, this original advocate for the show, feels this sense of betrayal. So we're going to look at the specific narrative failures, he points out, the accusations of, political messaging, derailing the plot, and this absolutely wild phenomenon that he talks about called Conformity Gate.
Oh, Conformity Gate is where you really see the psychological impact this had on the fans. It's wild.
I want to start there, actually, because when I first read Conformity source material, I assumed it was some kind of, behind-the-scenes scandal, a contract dispute or something.
You'd think so.
But it's not. It's a full-blown conspiracy theory invented by the fans.
It is pure, unadulterated denial. Morse explains that the reaction to the finale was just so visceral, so overwhelmingly negative, that a huge portion of the fandom just restayed. They refused to believe it was real. They completely convinced themselves that the bad ending they just watched was a fake-out.
A fake-out, like a prank on the audience.
Sort of. More like a test. The theory was that there was a secret 9th episode.
Yeah.
And people went deep. Fans were poring over, runtime codes on Netflix, looking at hidden frames and teasers, analyzing every single interview with the creators, anything to prove that Netflix was going to drop the real ending a week later and fix everything.
Wow.
And they called it Conformity Gate, which implies that if you accepted the bad ending as real, you were just, conforming to mediocrity. You were part of the problem.
That is literally the bargaining stage of grief, but on a global fandom-wide scale. This can't be the end, so there must be a secret plan.
That's it. Exactly.
Yeah.
But Morse bursts that bubble pretty ruthlessly.
Yeah.
He cites this documentary that was released about the making of the season, and the reality revealed in that documentary, it wasn't some secret genius plan. It was just chaos.
Chaos how? Like production issues.
Creative chaos.
Yeah.
There's apparently footage of the writer's room where they straight up admit on camera that they started filming the entire season without knowing how it was going to end.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
For a mystery show that's built on intricate plotting, that is the kiss of death.
It explains everything. He points to this one specific moment in the documentary where a staff member brings up a massive plot hole during a writer's, and the room it goes silent. Nobody has an answer, and they just move on.
So they just ignore it?
They ignore it. And that one moment, for Morse, validates his whole thesis. The show wasn't playing 4D chess with its audience. It just Netflixed all over itself. It completely lost control of its own rules.
And when you lose the rules, you lose the fear. Which brings us to one of Morse's most colorful terms for the final. He calls it the safe kitty coaster.
It's just a brutal nickname for a show that's supposed to be cosmic horror, isn't it?
It really is. He argues that for a show about, world-ending demons and alternate dimensions, the plot armor just became... He says the plot armor was so thick you could spell it with 50.
And the core of his argument here is all about stakes. It's simple storytelling, right? If you introduce a threat that is supposed to be beyond human comprehension, this hive mind that consumes entire dimension, then people have to die. Main characters, side characters, somebody.
Otherwise, the monster's not scary.
Exactly. If everyone survives every single encounter, the monster isn't a threat. It's just a prop, a special effect. Morse points to a very specific scene, that big group shot you mentioned. There are 15 people.
The whole gang, all together.
Right. You've got the main cast, plus what he calls the add-ons, the secondary characters who've joined up. And they're all facing this existential cosmic threat. Statistically, narratively, someone has to go down.
It's just the law of storytelling.
It should be, but no one does.
And it's not just the main cast that he's talking about, is it? He brings up this really specific grievance about a minor character, the truck guy. And I have to say, reading this part of the transcript, I laughed out loud because Morse is so specifically, so personally angry at this fictional truck driver.
It's the perfect example of what breaks suspension of disbelief, because it's so small, but so dumb. So here's the setup. The gang is escaping into the Upside Down in a truck, right? And this secondary character is driving. They come under fire. Oh, yeah. Morse describes watching bullets just shatter the windshield. The glass is peppering everything around the driver. We're talking about an automatic weapon fired directly into a truck cab.
Physics would say he's dead.
Physics would say he's hamburger meat, or, as Morse implies, he should be shredded cheese. But he survives. And not only does he survive with barely a scratch, but Morse complains that he retains all his annoying personality quirk. He keeps saying snookums. Snookums! Apparently that's his catchphrase for his girlfriend. He says it every 5 seconds. And Morse just found it incredibly grating. He compares this character to a bonsai tree that should have been snipped.
I love that metaphor. Let's unpack that. A bonsai tree is beautiful because you meticulously prune it. You cut away the unnecessary part.
That's it, exactly. Storytelling is about pruning. You have to cut away the deadwood, the distractions, the things that don't serve the core narrative. Morse is arguing that this truck guy was a branch that needed to be cut. And killing him would have accomplished 2 things. First, on a basic level, it would have stopped the annoying Snookums dialogue, which is a win. But second, and much more importantly, it would put blood on the ground.
It proves the bullets are real.
Exactly. If the truck guy dies from that hail of gunfire, then when 11 is in danger 5 minutes later, I, the viewer, might actually worry for her. But if the truck guy can survive a storm of bullets with a scratch, then I know 11 is going to be fine. The Safe Kitty coaster has its safety bars firmly locked in place.
And Morse mentions that the creators, the Duffer brothers, they actually lied about this, didn't they? Or at least misled the audience.
According to the source, yes, absolutely. The Duffer brothers had apparently stated in interviews leading up to the finale that people were going to die. They teased a bloodbath. They built up this expectation of real consequences.
So people went in expecting a gut punch.
They did.
Right.
And Moore says this made the Safe Kitty coaster feel even more insulting. He describes watching these tense scenes thinking, oh, okay, someone is definitely about to die here. This is it. But then nothing. He feels like he was sold a horror movie, and what he got was a Saturday morning cartoon.
And then there are the fake-outs. We have to talk about what he calls the Chewbacca death fake-out.
This involves Steve Harrington.
Yeah.
And the Chewbacca reference, for anyone who doesn't know, it refers to that scene in the Star Wars sequel where Chewbacca seemingly dies in this big ship explosion.
Right, and everyone is sad for like 3 minutes.
Exactly, for 3 minutes, and then it's revealed, oh, he was actually on a different transport. He's fine. It's a cheap emotional trick. It's manipulation without any of the narrative commitment.
All of the shock, none of the consequences.
Precisely. So in Stranger Things, there's a moment where Steve falls from a high tower. The screen cuts to black. There's silence. The show is just begging the audience to gasp. Oh, no, is Steve dead?
Morse wasn't gasping.
Far from it. He describes his reaction as just pure tedium. He imagines the audience at home just checking their phone, saying, can you just move this along, please? Because at that point, the trust is completely broken.
You know the rules of the ride.
You know the Safe Kitty coaster rules.
Yeah.
You know they are not going to kill Steve Harrington in that way, or maybe at all. So the suspense isn't suspense. It's just a waste of runtime. It's padding.
So if the show refused to kill anyone who does Morse think should have died, he actually lays out a death list, doesn't he? And it's not just, bloodlust. He has very specific narrative reasons for each of these choices.
It's a very structural argument. He believes death is a tool, a narrative device to complete a character arc or to propel another character's arc forward. Let's start with the big one he brings up. Hopper.
The sheriff, the dad of the group.
Yep. Morse argues Hopper should have gone out in a blaze of glory. He calls Hopper the meat and potatoes warrior of the group.
Meat and potatoes warrior? That is such a solid description. He's reliable, he's heavy, he's the core.
He implies substance. Right. Morse argues that Hopper's death would have left this tragic, gaping hole in the group. It would have created a genuine sense of vulnerability for everyone else. If the meat and potatoes warrior can die, then the kids are truly unsafe. That creates real tension.
Okay, that makes sense.
But more than that, he thinks it would have been poetic for Joyce's character.
How so?
He suggests that if Hopper had died, it would have been incredibly fitting for Joyce to be the one to finally chop off Vecna's head. We saw Hopper kill a Demogorgon with a sword in previous seasons.
Right, the Conan.
The Conan sword. Morse argues that Joyce taking up that sword, whether it's metaphorical or literal, would have been this incredible transfer of power, a moment of pure, righteous vengeance for the man she loved.
That's a classic revenge trope. The survivor takes up the fallen warrior's weapon to finish the fight.
And it would have been so satisfying. But because Hopper lived, Joyce just sort of stayed Joyce. She didn't get that transcendent, character-defining moment of action.
So who else is on Morse's chopping block?
Jonathan Bott. Morse argues pretty strongly that Jonathan should have died defending Nan.
Oof, that would have been a heartbreak.
It would have been. But Morse argues it's about emotional economy. You spend a life to buy a moment of growth for other characters. First, and most obviously, it resolves the love triangle with Nancy and Steve permanently and tragically. No more will they, won't they?
It forces a resolution.
Right. But second, and this is the more interesting point, Morse argues it would have given Will the necessary rage to finally harness his power.
Okay, this is the Gohan archetype. This was a really interesting point in the transcript. Can you explain that for people who maybe didn't grow up watching Dragon?
So Gohan is a character in Dragon Ball Z who is naturally very gentle. He's kind, he doesn't like to fight, but he possesses this hidden, world-shattering power that only unlocks when he sees someone he loves get hurt or killed. It's that classic, beware the fury of a patient man trope, the gentle giant who snaps.
So Morse sees Will as the Gohan.
He sees Will as the wizard of the group. Will has this deep psychic connection to the Upside Down. He can sense the mind flayer. Morse wanted to see Will finally unleash that inner beast. He imagines this scene where Jonathan dies protecting Nancy, and Will just snap.
A complete psychic meltdown.
Exactly. He connects with Henry, with Vecna, through their shared trauma and their connection to that other place, and just uses that connection to completely obliterate him from the inside.
That sounds incredible.
It does. It sounds like a real climax. But because everyone stays safe, Will stays passive. There's no trigger for his power. The gun is never fired.
What about the parents? I think he mentioned the Wheelers.
He did. Morse thinks the parents, Karen and Ted Wheeler, should have died, specifically dying valiantly while trying to save their daughter, Nancy.
That would have been really dark, but I can see the narrative logic there.
It gives Nancy what he calls emotional legitimacy. Morse argues that over the seasons, Nancy's become this Rambo figure, a full-on action hero. But his question is why? What's her motivation? If her parents die protecting her, her newfound militarism becomes a trauma response. She fights because she has lost everything.
It gives her a reason to be who she's become.
Right. Without that loss, she's just an action figure playing with guns. With it, she's a tragic hero.
But instead of a tragic death for Karen Wheeler, we got the action hero scene in the laundry room.
Mm-hmm.
I have to admit, hearing Morse describe this scene was hilarious.
It is the absolute antithesis of the bonsai tree philosophy of pruning the story. So Karen Wheeler wakes up, highly injured from a previous attack. She then picks up a full, heavy oxygen tank. She carries it down to the basement. She puts it inside a laundry dryer. And then she hobbles away just in time for it to explode and kill some demo dogs and save the day.
With an oxygen tank and a dryer as an improvised explosive.
That's the plan. Morse just finds it utterly absurd. And he contrasts this plot-driven invincibility with the idea of pruning the cast. He felt the cast was bloated. He specifically brings up Holly, Mike's younger sister.
Holly. I mean, she's basically a toddler in the early right. Background.
She's a bit older by the end, but yes, essentially background furniture for most of the show's run. Morse heavily criticizes the decision to have Holly, of all people, be the one who is somehow manipulating things inside Henry's mind during the finale.
Wait, Holly is the key. Why is that a problem?
Because the audience has no emotional relationship with her. We don't know her. Morse calls it chasing too many rabbits. In the final episode of a 10-year saga, you should be focusing on the characters we love, the ones whose journeys we've followed. Elevating a background extra to a key role in the main plot just distracts from the resolution we're all waiting for.
Feels like they were setting up a spin-off rather than actually ending the story.
That's exactly his point. It's a total distraction.
Yeah.
And speaking of the core cast, Morse thinks the ones who survived didn't exactly come out of it unscathed. He talks a lot about character assassination.
This is a huge section of his critique. It's not just that they lived, it's that they stopped being the people we knew and loved. He calls it archetype drift.
That's the term he uses, and it's a great one. The characters drifted so far from their original archetypes that they became unrecognizable.
Let's talk about Nancy Wheeler again. Morn calls her Rambo.
Insufferable action hero is the exact phrase he uses. He claims she shifted completely from being a smart, investigative, almost journalistic type to someone who just shoots first and asks questions never.
He mentions her aim, too, right?
Yeah. He notes that she suddenly has better aim than trained soldiers. There's a scene he points to where she's just shooting at an invisible thing in the sky without even trying to investigate what it is.
Which is the opposite of who she was.
It's a complete betrayal of her archetype. An investigator, a journalist asks, "What is that?" A soldier asks, "Is it a threat?" A bad action hero just shoot. He says she just adopts this permanent, hard-ass look that feels totally unearned by the story.
And what about the breakup scene? You mentioned the love triangle earlier.
Ooh, this is a rough one for him. He calls it one of the dumbest scenes in television history. It involves a proposal refusal from Jonathan. The line is, "Will you not marry me?"
Will you not marry me? That is so clunky. I don't even know what that means.
Morse mocks it relentlessly. He's like, so she accepts his proposal to not marry him. It's just cited as a prime example of the writing quality dropping off a cliff. It's circular, it's bizarre, and it completely robs the moment of any genuine emotion.
Okay, so Nancy's a mess. What about Robin? She was a huge fan favorite when she was introduced in 3.
A huge fan favorite. But Morse argues she underwent a complete personality transplant. He said she went from being this sarcastic, clever, down-to-earth character to a manic, borderline autist who cannot understand basic social cues.
That is a very harsh assessment.
It is. He's incredibly critical of how her quirkiness was handled. He says listening to her dialogue is like, and this is another amazing quote, "A public establishment playing Maroon 5 while I'm in the store. Someone owes me an apology."
Wow. That is a very specific and very devastating burn. You're not just bad, you're annoying back.
Exactly. He argues that the writers just took one trait, her chattiness and social awkwardness, and they flanderized. They turned it up to 11 until it completely consumed the character and she became a character.
And then there's Max. Now, Max had the moment of the entire series in season 4 with running up that hill. Does Morse think that momentum carried over at all?
Not even a little bit. He critiques a very specific scene involving a portal. So Max has been trapped in Vecna's mindscape for 2 years. A portal to reality opened. Logic would dictate you sprint through it immediately.
Right. You run for your life, no question.
Instead, Morse describes Max stopping to have a full conversation with Holly, who was also there for some reason. She tells Holly, "You can't come with me, this portal is mine." Morse just finds the logic baffling. Why are you stopping to explain the rules of magical travel when demons are presumably chasing you?
And he mentions that she abandons Holly.
Yes. He mocks the good luck moment. Max was this guardian figure to Holly inside the mindscape, and then she just leaves her behind. Meanwhile, in the real world, Lucas is literally carrying Max's comatose body, her dead weight ass, as Morse brutally puts it, fighting for his life. While Max is having this slow, sentimental, philosophical moment, just disconnects the urgency of the physical world from the mental world.
That disconnect seems to be a recurring theme here, and it leads us right into the biggest, most controversial part of his entire review, the accusation that the show became a delivery system.
This is where Morse really digs in. He calls it the Netflixing of the show. And his argument is that sociopolitical messaging was consistently prioritized over logical, coherent storytelling.
And the focal point of this entire critique is the character of Will Byers.
Correct. Specifically, it's about Will's coming out scene. Now, Morse is very careful to frame this. He argues that in a vacuum, a character coming out is perfectly fine. It could be a great story. But his issue is all about the timing and the context.
So set the scene for us. What's happening when this goes down?
The universe is ending. The apocalypse is literally at their door. Morse describes the group as being in the final moment, preparing to charge into a situation where they could all die. And at that moment, Will halts all momentum to have everyone sit down in a room so he can come out.
So it's a major pacing for him.
It's a huge pacing. But more than that, Morse argues it feels incredibly selfish. He says Will makes the entire end of the world about him when they have much bigger fish to fry. He compares it to being served slider meat at a 5-star steakhouse. It's just jarring, and it doesn't fit the tone or the occasion. He even calls Will a selfish turd for this, arguing that a real hero would put the mission first and their personal life second.
And he feels this choice actually reduced Will as a character.
Yes, absolutely. He argues Will became one-dimensional. He was defined solely by his sexuality rather than by his powers and his unique connection to the Upside Down. And this goes right back to that Gohan archetype we discussed.
The potential that was never...
Exactly. Morse wanted Will to be the magical powerhouse, the wizard. Instead, he feels the writers were far more interested in writing a teen drama about a crush than they were in writing a sci-fi epic about a boy with world-saving power.
He really didn't like the Mike and Will dynamic.
No, not at all. He points out the deep awkwardness of Will actively flirting with his best friend, who is in a committed relationship with Eleven, their other best friend. He feels it puts Mike in a terrible position and is just deeply disrespectful to Eleven. He says the show Netflixed all over it by choosing to focus on this social instead of the cosmic threat that was supposed to be the entire show.
He also touches on interracial, specifically with...
This is another one of the delicate points he raised. Morse says he suspects that Netflix and the writers emphasized the Lucas and Max bond specifically to avoid what he calls retconning an interracial relationship. He believes there's a kind of unspoken no white savior rule in effect in modern production.
Okay, what's his evidence for that?
He points to the use of the song Running Up That Hill. In season 4, it was established very clearly that the song was Max's lifeline. It was the literal magical key to her escaping Vecna. But in the finale, when she finally reunites with Lucas in the Mindscape, she says she didn't need the song. She only needed him.
That does sound like a bit of a retcon if the song was presented as the actual mechanic for her survival.
Morse finds it completely absurd. He says she literally would not have escaped without the song. He posits that Netflix avoids having white characters save black characters, or vice versa, in any way that might imply dependence. He argues they stripped the song of its narrative power just to give Lucas the savior moment, even though it contradicted their own established lore.
It's interesting. He compares the way Stranger Things handles these emotional beats to Avenger: Age of Ultron, which is funny because Ultron gets a lot of flack from fans, but he uses it as a positive example here.
He does, and it's a great point. He references the scene where Hawkeye is talking to a terrified Wanda Max. Wanda is having a full-blown panic attack, and Hawkeye gives her this very practical, tough love pep talk. He acknowledges the absurdity of it all, fighting robots on a floating city. But then he says, if you step out that door, you are an Avenger.
The put on your big girl panties and fight speech.
Exactly. And Morse loves that moment because it acknowledges the fear, but it demands action. It uses the emotional moment to fuel the plot. He contrasts that directly with Stranger Things, where he feels the heart-to-heart moments are just borderline boredom that completely lack weight. They stop the action to validate feelings rather than using feelings to fuel the action.
So, okay. We've lost the danger, the characters have fundamentally changed, and the messaging, according to him, is clunky and gets in the way. That brings us to the action itself, the final battle.
Or, as Morse calls it, with a lot of sarcasm, the kaiju fight.
A kaiju fight in Stranger.
It seems they went full Godzilla for the finale, but Morse just mocks the tactical planning from start to finish. The group's brilliant plan is to lure the giant mind flayer monster to a sheer cliff.
Okay.
Morse points out the obvious. Climbing a sheer cliff would take the monster hours. It's a terrible place for a trap. He says it's like putting a mousetrap on the ceiling and hoping the mouse figures it out.
And who do they choose to be the bait for?
Nancy, of course. And again, the girl boss critique comes right back. Nancy volunteers to be the runner. Morse points out there are literal athletes, jocks in the group who are faster than her. He says one is literally playing basketball in the scene. But no, Nancy, weighed down by weapons and gear, declares she will be the runner.
And the physics of the chase itself.
Flexible would be a very generous word. He describes Nancy outrunning a giant creature that can cross a football field in a single stride. She somehow survives massive rock falls that should have concussed her, or worse. And then, just in the nick of time, the rest of the gang arrives to firebomb the creature.
And how did they get there so fast?
Morse likens their arrival to the speed of Game of Thrones' Raven. You know how in the later seasons of Game of Thrones, characters would just teleport across entire continents to make the plot work?
Yeah, travel time became irrelevant.
Exactly. Morse sees the same laziness here. Distance meant nothing. Time meant nothing. The only thing that mattered was getting the cool shot of them arriving to save the day.
And didn't he mention something about Steve and Dustin attacking the monster?
Yes, this is the spear scene. He describes them charging under the giant monster and just stabbing its belly with makeshift spears. Morse notes that the monster only had to dip its body down. He jokes that their plot armor had a thickness of 25.
He also points out a huge inconsistency with the monster's intelligence.
A really big one for him. The Mind Flayer is supposed to be this ancient, intelligent, hive mind entity. But in this final fight, it just acts like a mindless animal. It keeps trying to bite Nancy instead of using its massive building-sized limbs to just sweep everyone off the cliff. It's defanged to allow the heroes to have a cool-looking fight.
And this is where the wino with a broken bottle comes in.
Yes. He claims the Demogorgons, which in Season 1 were these unstoppable forces of nature, can now apparently be slowed down by a wino with a broken bottle. It's that old action movie trope, the law of conservation of ninjutsu.
Right. One ninja is a major threat. 100 ninjas are just cannon fodder that the hero can take down easily.
That's it. The monsters became cannon fodder.
So they win. The monster dies. Joyce, I'm assuming, doesn't get to chop off Vecna's head. And then we get to the epilogue. The prologue is...
And if he hated the seas, he absolutely loathed the... He breaks down the final fates of all the characters, and he sees it as the final nail in the coffin of that authentic 80s vibe the show used to have.
Okay, let's run through the fates. Where does everyone end up, according to this episode?
Nancy becomes a career woman in the big city who don't need no man. Robin ends up at an all-girls school.
And Jonathan.
This one really annoyed Morse. Jonathan is describing the ending as a communist filmmaker.
A communist filmmaker in the Reagan era, in small-town India.
Morse finds it historically laughable. He argues that a suburban white guy in the absolute peak of anti-communist Reagan-era America would not have 2025 LA value. It felt completely anachronistic to him. He felt the writers were just projecting their own modern politics onto the character, totally ignoring the historical reality of 1980.
It breaks the immersion. And what about Steve?
Steve is the only one Morse likes. Steve settles down, he coaches baseball, he has kids. Morse calls it the only grounded arc that didn't suffer from that archetype drift. Steve felt like a natural conclusion.
And Dustin.
Dustin becomes the valedictorian. But he makes his entire graduation speech about Eddie Munson,
the hero of Season 4.
And Morse had big issues with this. He feels that Dustin essentially made remembering Eddie his entire personality. Morse reiterates his belief from his review of the previous season that Eddie didn't have to die in the first place, that he basically unalived himself for no good reason and called it heroism. So seeing Dustin double down on that in the finale just grated on it. It felt like the show patting itself on the back for a mistake it made last season.
But this is where it gets really interesting, the Matrix theory. Morse started noticing some weird visual details in this epilogue, didn't he?
He did. And this is where that Conformity Gate conspiracy theory starts to look almost appealing to him because the ending feels so wrong. He points out these visual oddities. So Karen Wheeler had these deep scars from her injuries earlier. Remember the oxygen tank adventure?
Yeah.
But in the epilogue scenes, they're gone. Just smooth skin.
A simple makeup error.
In a show with a budget of hundreds of millions of dollars?
Yeah.
Perhaps. But then he saw the yellow poster boards at the high school graduation. They were completely empty. Just blank yellow rectangles. No writing on them at all.
Empty posters. That's eerie.
It creates this sense of unreality, like a video game texture that hasn't fully loaded yet. And he also mentions what he calls Truman Show references sprinkled throughout the epilogue.
The idea that the whole world is a set, a fabrication.
Morse takes all of this.
Yeah.
The lack of consequences for the kids killing soldiers, which they did, yet they face no legal trouble. The magically healing scars, the blank textures. And he comes to one final dark conclusion. Vecno 1.
The Matrix theory. The happy ending is a lie. They're all in a simulation.
He argues that the happy ending we see is actually a pacification program. They are all trapped in a collective mind prison, being fed their fantasies so that Vecna can consume them or consume the world unopposed.
That is a grim, grim verdict. He is essentially saying, I would rather they all be dead or enslaved in the simulation than have to accept this bad writing as reality.
It speaks volumes about how much the internal logic of a story matters, and to a lot of fans. If the writing breaks the rules, the happiness feels unearned and hollow. But if it's a simulation, at least the weirdness makes sense. He says that while that ending is tragic, it's better than the stupid one we got.
It effectively canonizes all the flaws. It sucks on purpose.
Exactly. It's the only way Morse can reconcile the show he once loved with the ending he has.
And he wraps up the entire review with a recommendation. He says to go watch the show Dark instead.
Yes. The German sci-fi series on Netflix. He calls it the grown-up Stranger Things. A slow burn, he had consistent. A show that respects its own rules from beginning to end.
So let's recap this entire journey. We went from a passionate fan who loved the Spielberg vibes, who ate up interdimensional monsters,
to a hate watcher, dissecting the 15 C's of plot armor and cheering for a tragic, simulated ending over a happy, real one.
It's a real cautionary tale about that archetype drift you mentioned and the dangers of placing messaging or even just unearned happy moments above narrative consistency. When you break your own rules to save characters or send a message, you risk invalidating the entire journey that came.
You really do.
It raises a big question for all of us, for you listeners. If a show breaks its own internal logic just to give us a happy ending, does that ending actually count? Or are we all just watching a safe?
And if you start noticing the poster boards are empty in your own life, well, maybe ask some questions.
Something to mull over. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure. Watch your back for any mysterious portals.
And maybe check your posterior for any magically healing scars, just in case. We'll see you next time.